Hi, everybody. This is Alicia Lashesky, and we're here with another episode of CX on Point. Today, joining me is Precision Point partner Ken Epstein and the very famous Kyle McDowell, who was here with us a couple of years ago, I believe, Kyle. So, welcome back.
Hey, Alicia, it's really great to see you again. Thanks for having me back. Ken, likewise, good to see you.
Always good to see you too, Kyle. Always good to see you, and I do appreciate your coming on today. For those of you who are not familiar with Kyle, Kyle has had an absolutely extraordinary career, a very notable career, and in fact, has led major organizations in healthcare, in BPO, in business process management overall. And 2 years ago, he wrote a book called Begin with We, which is a Wall Street Journal and USA Today bestseller. So, dude, way to go. Congratulations. I read it. It's a fantastic book. It sings to me, and you know me pretty well. So, from the standpoint of culture, it definitely resonated well with me. And I thought maybe we talk a little bit about culture today because you are the expert on culture in my book these days, in your book these days. Um, so, how would you define corporate culture? Let's start there. Why is it so important to organizations? It's probably the precipice for writing the book.
Yeah, well, so I think the second part of your question might be the right place to start is, why? Why is this stuff important? Why was I compelled to write a book? So with that in mind, maybe some context. So I spent nearly 30 years in big corporate America leading fairly massive organizations. For context, my last two roles, I led just north of 30,000 employees.
Yeah.
I led P&Ls in the billions of dollar range for some very well-known brands, some brands that folks in your audience have, I'm sure, are familiar with. But and probably worth adding that throughout my journey, my corporate America journey, by most standards, pretty successful career. I had the fancy offices with the conference tables and the cool couches, and for some reason, my jokes were always the funniest in the room when I met with any number of people that I was leading or the teams I was with. But in spite of that, Ken, I found myself, and it's really got the noise in my head became very loud around the 2022 year mark. And the noise was really apathy. I just felt so disconnected. I felt kind of disenfranchised from, ironically, the organizations and the cultures that I actually helped create. I woke up one morning and it wasn't there was no sentinel event, but I just remember thinking, my health is not where it should be. I was facing a divorce. This is probably 2016. I had a divorce on the horizon, not in great health. The teams that I led, while I felt like for years they had a great deal of respect for me, it turns out they actually feared me. And I just started to think there has to be more to this existence than clock in, clock out, keep your head down, bang your fist on a desk when something doesn't go right. I just felt like there had to be more. So fast forward a couple years later, I was really fortunate enough to step away from the fray and put my head together and think about what I wanted to do next. And I weighed the options of going back into the corporate life to lead another organization, or did I feel like I had something else to give? Well, and I wanted to go that route, the something else to give route, but in a real be careful what you wish for moment, I was offered a role that involved leading about 15,000 really purpose-driven men and women in, I think, the largest healthcare enrollment operation in the U.S., if not the world. So it was leading the Affordable Care Act enrollment centers as well as 1-800 Medicare. And I was warned before I took the role. There was a bit of dysfunction, some silo kind of positioning type stuff, and I knew if I wanted to find a different level of satisfaction, because I do believe all of us enter the workforce with a desire to find satisfaction. We want to be fulfilled. We want to have an impact. We want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves. And I knew if I was going to create that environment, not the type of environment that I had created and kind of tolerated in years past, I was going to have to lead differently. So I took the role, and the night before I was to meet with the top 40 or 50 leaders of the organization, I crafted these principles. And at the time, I'd even call them principles. They were just 10 sentences that I said, hey guys, these are the rules that will govern how we treat each other first, number one, and then how we treat those that we serve externally. Because it's my experience, and I'd love your guys' take on this, is if we're high functioning behind the curtains, the odds that we are going to be high functioning and deliver excellence to those that we lead, to those that we sell our products to and for, our services as well, we are so much more likely to be excellent in their eyes if we are excellent behind the scenes and treat each other with respect and dignity and compassion. So these 10
Absolutely.
principles, I ended up introducing them to the team the next morning. And long story short, this group now kind of views the 10 We's as their cultural manifesto. They have the 10 We Awards a couple of times a year. And I was able to step away again after a few more years in the corporate world and wrote this book that you mentioned. And I'm so fortunate with the way the book is resonating in the corporate world today. It's creating real leaders out of bosses and transforming organizations in ways that most people in those organizations really didn't think possible. And what I've found throughout my journey is most organizations are really good at teaching people how to do their job. They're really good at the X's and O's, the fundamentals of what it takes to get the laundry out in the role that they perform, but they don't do much in the way of creating a code of behavior, how we expect those around us to behave towards one another, how we keep our commitments, how we show empathy, and how we inspire those around us. And that's where the 10 We's come in. They are a series of principles that dictate how we treat each other and then those that we serve. So I think it's filling a real gap inside of the corporate world today. And to round out this long-winded answer, for me, a culture is not just a culture. I aspire to create cultures of excellence. And within a culture of excellence, we have a group of people that are aligned on personal, professional, and corporate goals, including the personal component is what is missing in so many environments. And I think if we can connect with those that we lead on their personal objectives, even if they're different than what it is that I'm trying to accomplish in my own or the corporate goals, objectives, the connection that we can find with those on our teams, those that we look to our left and to our right and see every single day, is so much stronger, and the results just follow in ways that people probably aren't familiar with. It's just a really beautiful thing to watch come together.
Yeah, I know in your book I read about then I guess it was in Lawrence, Kansas, the infamous
Changed my
night.
life.
And
Yeah.
and I've known you for a long time. Was that an epiphany? It sounds almost like an epiphany in the book, but it has to be something that was just eaten away at you for the longest time.
It's the latter. I wish there was a sexy story about some muse on my shoulder and how this was kind of meant to be. The truth is, the next morning when I stepped out to share the principles with the team, I had no inclination that we would be talking about them 7 or 8 years later. I wasn't even certain that the team I was leading would be talking about them 7 or 8 days later. But what I found, and I continue to see it either in my coaching business or even, when I meet with folks after being on stage, is there is a hunger. There's a hunger in the workplace for people to be reconnected with one another. And this whole obsession that we're all so familiar with, that I think social media really perpetuates rather, is this me versus we paradigm. How, for us to be successful, I have to be successful. And for me to win, someone else must lose. And that's just not the case in any team environment, not just a business, but in any team environment. We can have people all win at the same time. So no epiphany. The epiphany, if there ever was one, was when I realized there had to be something better and bigger, and more impactful than the way I was leading and the way I was living my life at that time. Because that's the other unintended byproduct that I'm really kind of so humbled to hear from readers, is these principles, they serve them well in the workplace, but they've also become their code of ethics and behavior for their personal lives. I had a fellow tell me that it changed how he raises his children.
100%.
Which is, I have chills even saying that. It's a incredibly profound thing for someone to say and hear.
It's great to hear you say that, because as I'm reading the book and rereading it, it's lessons in life. applied to business. It's the way we should treat each other as humans, whether you're at work or whether you're at home, and just applying that same sort of empathy and caring for other people in the workplace. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But one thing that we've noticed over the course of time with our my partners and I, as we have brought up businesses, creating culture seemingly a lot easier than changing culture.
Mm.
What's your experience around that? Now, I know that in your first endeavor with the Wees, you had to change the culture. There were people that had worked for me bosses for a long
Mhm.
time. I think we
Mhm.
referred to them once as bad bosses.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you had to kind of reprogram them. At first, you had to convince them that you were serious and that it wasn't just a bunch of great words that you were saying to motivate them.
Yeah.
A lot more difficult, would you say, to do that than to go into a brand new organization and just say, this is how we're doing it, breaking old bad habits?
Yeah. So for me, I've always felt it's easier when you're the new guy, because I'm entering the equation as an unknown entity, and I have an opportunity to essentially start from scratch. Um, that's not to say we can't drive a big transformation for an organization that I've been a part of for a while. It's just tougher because, I mean, look at it this way. I truly believe, and this is just an equation that I bounce around in my brain a lot. I believe authenticity plus relatability equals trust. And trust is the cornerstone of any great leader, all great leaders. But if I've been a part of an organization for some time and I have behaved in a certain way that is more me oriented than we oriented, or I've been, not the easiest fellow to work for, not the greatest partner or the greatest team member, flipping that switch in a way that is authentic and relatable is really hard to do. It's like, hang on a second. Last week you were the guy that was complaining about, everything under the sun, but today, okay, you read some leadership book and now we're supposed to follow you because you feel like you found some new way of leading. I think that's inauthentic, and I think trust is hard to gather. Now, there's a common element between either being the new guy or being someone that's been entrenched for many years to a successful transformation. The common element is repetition. It is walking the walk. It is continuing to live the things that you're evangelizing. And I remember very vividly when I introduced these principles, one of the principles is we embrace challenge, which follows we challenge each other. And at that organization I mentioned earlier, when I introduced the principles, I had a direct report of mine who was difficult, and I'm being PG. She was difficult, but she was a jerk. She went out of her way to make life difficult for me. I was the new guy. She had been there for a dozen years, and she was not gonna. There was no ambiguity. She had forgotten more than I knew about my new role. And there was some arm wrestling back and forth. And the Kyle of old, and I think most leaders or bosses' reaction to this kind of pushback from an employee would probably be a little more terse, like, let's bang the fist on the desk. It's because I said so, those types of things. But I remember, if there was an epiphany, it might have been this. It's, okay, dude, you just got off stage talking about we embrace challenge. And now you have an employee who's being incredibly difficult, even insubordinate. What are you going to do? Are you going to walk this walk? Or are you just going to talk about it? Because I knew at that time everyone was watching me, the new guy, to see if I was actually going to live this way, if I was going to lead this way, or was it just words on a wall like so many other companies have with their mission statements and values and things like that. So for me to live it every single day, even when it was inconvenient, even when I didn't want to, even when it might have slowed things down a little bit, that leading by example, also we lead by example, was something that I found to be incredibly important in the adoption and the transformation we were trying to take on.
Is there a way for organizations to measure the effectiveness of their corporate culture initiatives? I mean, there's got to be a lot of ways, but is there anything that you look for that you like? I see this first and I see it's working.
Yeah. So as you mentioned, there's a number of ways, but I like to look at employee engagement surveys. I like to look at skip level feedback. I like to look at 360 surveys. Any environment or mechanism that I can get candid, unfiltered, even anonymous feedback, especially before and after. So if we've started an initiative, what do those metrics look like prior to the beginning of this initiative? And by the way, no one should ever look at a transformation as an initiative. It's a way of life. It is not a light switch. So looking at quantified metrics that way, I think other ways would include looking at your attrition. How much turnover are we experiencing maybe before and after the introduction of some type of transformation. So yeah, the metrics are there. And I get this question a lot, Ken, because I do some work while I go into an organization, meet with all the leaders and do an assessment of kind of the, for lack of a better expression, the we orientation or paradigm of their leaders, and then provide some feedback to the organization. A lot of time, not a lot of times, almost every time in these engagements, someone will ask, well, how do we quantify the money that we're spending on you is really adding value? And sometimes it's hard to answer. It really is hard to answer. And it really boils down to something you said a moment ago. It's like, are we leading as good humans? Are we being good people? Are we leaving this environment, this industry, and the people within our company in a better place than the place they were before we started? Those are measurements that are hard to quantify, but absolutely powerful in terms of the fulfillment, the impact, and people's desire to be a part of a team like that.
Yeah. You talk about in your book, there was a story, I think it was a really bad hurricane in upstate Florida. You had a bunch of people, like a lot of people, 1,500, I think it was.
A couple thousand almost, yeah.
Yeah, that were sort of stuck. And the organization you worked for really didn't want to cooperate with you when you were like, look, we're going to help them. We're going to show we care, and we're going to get into the boat with them.
Yeah.
And I remember the story. You kind of went and did it anyway, even though it was shunned.
Yeah.
But how do you deal with that? How do you know what's right, and you're being told by the people you work for, you believe in this culture, you believe in doing the right thing, you believe in caring and showing that empathy. How do you do that?
Well, that was a sentinel moment in my career, but also a sentinel moment in my leadership journey. So for some context for your audience, yeah, it was Hurricane Michael up in the Panhandle, and we had an office up there that had anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 employees, and the city was devastated, man. It was devastated. And in classic corporate America fashion, at the time, I reported to the president of the division that I was operating within, and classic corporate America fashion, I went to her to say, listen, man, we've got a once in a lifetime scenario here where we've got people. Ken, we had folks that were more than a few. Their home was gone. It wasn't damaged. It wasn't there any longer. People with very young children that they didn't know where the next bottle of formula was going to come from. We had really, really, really dire straits for so many people. I went to the president of the division and said, hey, we got to do something. I don't know what something means. We got to do something. Can we start a GoFundMe? Can we have other members, because it was a 15,000 person organization, we have other members of the team donate their PTO to this group of folks who really need it now more than ever, because they can't come to work because they don't even have a home or clothes in a home to get ready to come to work. And every single scenario that I offered was shot down. And it's unconscionable to me at this point, still looking back, on how anyone could look me in the eye and say, no, you can't go start a GoFundMe because you'll set a precedent that the next time something bad happens or a crisis comes to light, there's going to be an expectation. You can't do that. We can't do the vacation donation thing, because PTO donate, because we've never done that before. Administratively, it'd be a mess. We can't do that. So I remember it was a gut check moment for me where I called my direct reports. I had, I don't know, 6 or 7 at the time. And before that day was up, we had a GoFundMe started. 2 or 3 members of my team were prepared to join me up in the Panhandle to see this damage firsthand. And to just offer some words of support. I didn't realize that when someone in a position of leadership, or let's just say a position of authority for this story, when someone goes out of their way to say I care and to offer a hug, the impact that action, that behavior has on those in the most down of down states is something I will never forget. I walked into this office. One other fellow on the team met me up there. I walked into the office and we were greeted with giant smiles and hugs and some tears and nothing but warm gratitude. And literally one lady asked me, what can we do for you while you're here? Like, wait a second. But there were people, by the way, they were in the office a day or two after the storm hit. Many of them that were in the office didn't have a place to stay, but they still came to work. And I'll never forget the stories that I heard and the desperation in some of their voices. But the gut check moment, Ken, for me was, I'm the guy that's always evangelizing. We do the right thing. We pick each other up, 2 of the 10 we's. And for me to turn my cheek to them because of some silly corporate response that in my heart I knew was not the right response, I was prepared to lose my job over it. And now I must caveat that I understand I'm a lucky guy. I could have walked away from my job and my bills would have been paid for a number of months and I'd be okay. Not everybody is that fortunate. I say that just to caveat that everyone has these decisions to make, right? Am I going to kind of keep my head down and not do the right thing at my own peril, or am I prepared to deal with those consequences? I was lucky enough to be able to, I was prepared for those consequences. But wouldn't you know it, as soon as the benefits of the GoFundMe started to be felt, as soon as the good morale started to kind of climb after our visit, the tone from the company changed. It was like, oh, look at the great work we're doing to help our people. And it was hollow. It was just so hollow. So anyway, we're all faced with these sentinel moments or these kind of gut check moments, be careful what you wish for moments, whatever you want to call them, where our leadership mettle is tested. And I'll go as far to say my leadership legacy was on the line. And those are 2 words, as you know, Ken, that I use a lot. Those 2 words, leadership legacy. I don't think people use those words together a lot. At the same time, we reserve legacy for guys like Tom Brady or people in the spotlight. But if you're leading people, make no mistake, you have a leadership legacy. There are people at their dinner table talking about you. And I am not naive to that. And I want that conversation to be one of gratitude and, not all unicorns and rainbows. Kyle, can be very difficult. I can be very tough on people because I have high expectations. But you will never question my commitment to you, your own growth and your development. And when you need me the most, never question if I'll be there or not.
So important. And Alicia can certainly relate to this. In the many years that we worked together and with labor-intensive businesses with literally tens of thousands of people, we always put the employees first. That was the very first order of magnitude for us, to make sure that we created a great work environment. Similar situations, big tornadoes in Joplin, Missouri many years ago. A lot of our people were messed up. We were Johnny on the spot right there. I find it absolutely unconscionable that a company would say to you, we're setting a bad precedent if we do this. Because what you're setting the right precedent, in my opinion, the right precedent. So
how can there be another opinion? How can I just don't see it. So there's something that happens, and I want to circle back to something you just said, but real quickly, there's something that happens to us, and it happened to me for many years. We are one person 16 hours of the day, and the other 8 we turn into somebody else. And those 8 are when we're working. Our empathy fades, our compassion wanes. I mean, hell, you guys, like, we have a different vocabulary. When you step in the workplace, when's the last time either of you went home to your significant other and asked them how they're doing on their deliverables? Nobody speaks that way.
It's been a while.
Nobody speaks that way, right?
Right.
So through this filtering of natural human emotions, we're wired to want to help one another. It's in our DNA. We want to help other people, and we are open in most cases and want to be helped. But something happens in this dog-eat-dog kind of environment that a lot of companies have there. They lose that humanity. They lose the compassion that every one of us deserves. I remember a story you told. You were dealing with a personal crisis. You had a phone call or received a phone call from your leader at the time. And I'm going to need you to fill in the gaps. You remember the story? You have to remember the story. You shared it with me last time we met. That's a leadership legacy. He wasn't even my leader, but this guy treated you so poorly. I remember the conversation that we had 2 years later. So the impact he had on you could be nothing but horrible.
but no, I do remember telling you that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it's the way that my company was founded. And, yeah, it was just terrible. And, I was walking into a double mastectomy. And unfortunately, that seemed to be the right time to receive an email somewhat threatening my job and my role. When I came back and I told my husband, who many people that are probably listening to this podcast know because he's in the industry, and I said, Corey, if I don't flatline, remind me that I'm going to probably need to quit this job when I come out. For a lot of reasons, but the most important one was I could not have been given a second chance at life, given the opportunity to have a proactive surgery of this magnitude and, stay in an environment like that really didn't match my moral compass. So that is the story. And that's the genesis of this company. And as Ken knows, because we talk about this, is, I only work with customers who share those values. And at times, I've had to stick around longer with certain customers just because, I have obviously a lot of people that rely on their work with me. But for the most part, it always works out where it needs to go, that those people either go away or we dismiss them as customers because that's part of my value system. So, yeah, but thank you for remembering that. I thought you were going to tell a funny story about Ken. I do have
he's got a few of those.
Yeah, exactly. I do have a question though, that just thinking about, I think all of these principles and I think the three of us on this call share, and I think it's values, right? It's share that value system, and you've articulated this so well in your book. I've found though, working for different types of companies, that it all sounds great when things are great.
Yeah.
And now, 2 years later, obviously, and just things might be a little bit tougher than the last time we had this conversation. And for big corporations, how do you keep people motivated? Because a lot of this mindset does require investment, whether it's people or resources or whatever, to really keep that type of culture alive. So I'm just curious to see what your advice is to people who are facing some budgeting challenges, but how to not let go of something that is important as this.
Yeah, great question. And it does require an investment, but the investment in my mind is care and it's energy. Listen, man, it's when we sign up to lead others, most of the time we sign up because there's a bigger paycheck and we love the idea of being in charge of others. Like we love the authority that it gives us. And maybe those are, look, there were attractive components to me when I first started in my career journey. But what we're really signing up for is putting our own aspirations and our own needs aside for those that we lead. And that sounds a little woo-woo and a little corny. I get that. But I say that because we're not signing up to get things done. We're signing up to help lead, motivate, inspire those that actually do get things done. And that is not a light switch. It ain't easy. The 10 W's, I'm the first to admit they are simple. There is nothing groundbreaking, but simple does not mean easy. And the direct answer to your question is it takes making a choice almost daily, and sometimes multiple times a day, making the choice that I want to help someone on their journey. I want to put them in a position where they're better off than they were before they met me. I want to deliver great results because I care about my own personal brand. I want to be someone that is known for delivering great results while doing it the right way, inspiring and motivating others to along their paths. Now, I won't bullshit you. There are days where I lead another business that's unrelated to the book that has I don't know 500 or 600 employees depending on the time of the year. And I won't bullshit you. There are days where I don't have that juice, where I'm walking into that office and I just don't feel like being the rah-rah motivational guy, which by the way, you don't have to be rah-rah to lead a team. You just, there's so many other attributes that come before rah-rah. But I guys, I literally remind myself, okay, dude, this is what you signed up for. There's no on-off switch here. Now, if you're in a bad mood or you're facing a challenge that is ugly, it's okay to be vulnerable and share that with those that you lead. It's not okay to be a jerk and hide it and create some enemy of that is veiled or has a cloak of fear. So I'm human, but I have to tell myself every single day and remind myself, this is what I signed up for. I asked for this. And I think a lot of us, and I know I did for many years, when we get in this leadership position, we feel like we should maybe not behave that way or not have to work as hard because I can just tell other people to do the work. But that's not a long-term recipe for success. I just think we have to invest a level of care and energy more so than maybe we're comfortable doing at first. But let me tell you, man, when you make that investment and the results that come, not just in the business KPIs and those things, but the connections that you forge and the goodwill that's created when you lead that way has such a profound impact. At least it has on me, on my personal satisfaction, my level of fulfillment, not just the business level of fulfillment. So it's a long way of saying, Alicia, it is a daily investment that requires leading by example, showing people who you really are, even if it's ugly at times, because that relatability is important. And that's as I mentioned, the foundation for trust.
There's no fee to do it that way, is there?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. I tell the story in the book, and I haven't mentioned this in a while, but the way you said that reminded me, like, and I know someone in your audience may roll their eyes at this, but it's true. Let's pretend for a moment and I'm going to modify the story a little bit. I lead housekeeping for a major hotel chain, right? I want the members of my team to clean the room and fold the bed and do all the things that are required to do exactly the same with a level of excellence that makes us proud of what we've done, whether I am the leader at a Motel 6 or a Ritz-Carlton. It doesn't cost me any more. But the caliber and the brand that I want to be associated with, whether it's the Motel 6 or the Ritz-Carlton, that is connected to who I am and the brand that I choose to kind of promote. So whether that is free, your level of effort is free. Now, that may involve trade-offs, and you have to take on this versus that. And, some things might have to sit over here because I got to focus on that first. I'm not naive for that. But the level of care that I put into those that I lead and my investment and energy towards them, that is unlimited.
In your book, and it's funny because I think you mentioned that you typically use the term rainbows and unicorns, which I heard you use a few seconds ago. But it's not always rainbows and unicorns, right?
Oh.
I was particularly interested in how you handled it when your staff, very large staff, were up for raises, and you had to explain to them the reasons that they weren't going to get a raise, yet you found a very positive way to spin that. And I thought it was just brilliant, the way you were honest, which is, I think is rare in business today.
Yeah, you're talking about a story where I led, there's about 15,000 people in that role that our pay was essentially established by what's called a wage determination. It's a fancy term for saying the government sets these wages. It was a government contractor. A government sets these wages, this rate of pay in this zip code for this position. Now the company can choose to pay way higher, but they cannot pay any lower. It's almost like a minimum wage for that role. And I would get the question a lot. Hey, Kyle, can we get raises? Can we get more raises? Can we get paid more? And I would answer it the same every single time. I would love to give more raises. I would love to pay you more. However, we are in a contract with an entity that has an opportunity to send our contract back to rebid at any moment. If not when the contract expires, they can take it back to market anytime they like. And if they do that, let's just pretend it is at the expiration of the deal. If they take that contract back to the market and say, we want to rebid this deal, one of the requirements to win these deals is economics and the financials of the deal. And if I have inflated our pay to a point where some other competitor can come in and underbid us and win the business, those 15,000 people are now out of jobs entirely. They have no money. They have no income, at least in this role. So for me to say, I would love to give you the raise, I really would, guys. I would pay you what you think you're worth, because it's not my money. I would be happy to make you whole, whatever you think is whole. But the risk that comes with that is so real that we may all be out of a job that it just doesn't make sense. Now, If you think you're adding value over and above what you're contributing today, and you deserve to get paid more, I will help you find that job somewhere else. And I mean that with sincerity. It's not a like turn my cheek on you. If you think you are adding value, and even if I believe you and I agree with you, you want to find a role that will compensate you in a way that you think is commensurate with your value. Let's get that resume out. I will help you work on that. I will do mock interviews with you. I will give you a letter of recommendation. I want you to be your very best, even if it's not on my team. What happens when you take that approach, you guys, is really unknown to a lot of people, because most people won't even take that approach, right? There's usually this, you're so valuable in the role that you're in. I don't want to promote you or move you to something else because then I lose something over here. And then they ultimately, they end up leaving anyway. When you show that you actually care, and I mentioned this earlier when we're aligned on personal, professional, and corporate goals, when you show that you care in someone's personal goals, and that might mean leaving your team, that could mean a bigger title somewhere else or a raise somewhere, whatever it is, but it involves leaving you, and you show that you're invested in them making that move, even though it might hurt you, the team that they're on might take a step back because of their absence. Do you think they work less hard for you? Do you think they're not committed more so than you were if you never had that conversation? It is so bizarre to me that people, they turn a cheek and act as if someone's dead to them when they express an interest to go do something else. Not me. I recognize that that I may take a step back, but they're going to take a step forward, and collectively as a team, we're going to be fine, because I'll find somebody to backfill you. But you'll never forget the impact I had on you, helping you get that next job. And I just think that's an obligation as being a good human, candidly.
I absolutely couldn't agree more. And the investment in people, not employed, in people, that's your product.
That's it.
That's your product. How they do is how you do.
Yeah.
So if you invest in them, and if they get up every morning and they look forward to going into work and they want to be a part of the team, then everybody pulls in the same direction and works together, and we win. Mm-hmm. I have overseen reward and recognition programs for large companies. And one of the things I found to be particularly interesting, particularly at this level, is often the recognition is more important to those employees than the award itself. I think we did stuff together years ago where you were my client, and I think you came into one of our sites and shook hands with some of our associates, took pictures with them, which we put in a newsletter, and people love that so much more than the gift card we might have given them. So what's your take on that? I mean, I think that fits right in with what you're doing.
Yeah, man, it's I think it's a cop out to say that money is what will buy happiness inside the workplace. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not naive. Money goes a long way, but I'll point you to some data. So Glassdoor and MIT did a study. They partnered on something called the Culture 500. And this is back during the Great Resignation, right? So just a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago. And they analyzed 30 million profiles on Glassdoor, 30 million profiles of job seekers, those that had left their role for any number of reasons. And they analyzed it. This is a big data set, right? So they come back with the top handful of reasons why people leave their roles. Number one was toxic work culture. Guess where money came in? Guess where compensation came in on this list? 16. So your point is spot on. People will leave an organization for money sometimes, but the recognition that they get, an attaboy, an email, a hug, a handshake, a high five, you name it, is something that can be very powerful. And I have to admit, I am usually, and for many years, I'm kind of the skeptic on that front. I'm like, wait, somebody is excited to say hello and shake a hand or get an email that says they've done a great job. And I've been proven wrong so many times because the impact it's had on others, and hearing that played back some months or even years later, like, hey, Kyle, you remember when we spoke on, and of course I don't have a recollection of it, but the impact it had on them, they never go back and say, hey man, thanks for that 4% raise you gave me 3 years ago, or that 10% raise, right? So again, it's back to being a good human.
Nothing makes me feel better than getting notes from people that I worked with 15 years ago. I haven't talked to, just saying it was great. I mean, I learned more from you. And talk about recognition. It goes both ways, by the way. I am absolutely glowing after seeing the impact that I had on people, which, like you, I agree. It's that to me, I get such personal
A drug.
satisfaction out of that. I think
Mhm.
it is. It's very, very
Mhm.
important. I was thinking that with the pandemic, when we were all locked up and it was weird, right? I mean, nobody ever expected that. I kind of was hoping that maybe that would be the precursor to everybody helping each other, realizing that we were all fighting something that none of us, it wasn't a person, it wasn't
Yeah.
a country, it wasn't a,
Yeah.
I was really hoping that that was going to instill that sort of empathy for one another. And I noticed, you'd go out and everybody's masked up. Everybody was, hi, how are you?
Mhm.
Strangers. It was just so heartwarming. And that kind of fits right into begin with we. I
Mm.
kind of hoped it would transition into the corporate environment. And I don't think it has in the way it could have.
I could not agree more. There are these moments throughout history where the public at large is galvanized, right? Think back to 9/11. After 9/11, we were probably the most unified country, most unified US that we've ever seen. I remember it like it was yesterday. Ken, it's funny you mentioned it because I had a similar take when COVID was here. It's like when we come out of this, we're gonna lock arms and we're gonna
Yeah.
because we've seen like some of the petty stuff that we all kind of get so obsessed with, and the silly shit that we make bigger and more important than it really is. Now we have perspective. Those things may not matter as much as we once thought they did. But the workplace did not react that way at all. So there's something called the Gallup State of the Global Workplace Survey. They do it every single year. I'm a nerd, so I'm excited. The 24 report comes out next week. And in this survey, they ask a series of questions. They ask it. They've done it since 2009. They've had more than 2 million respondents. It's like 160 countries participate, something like that. And this question, or the statement rather, is part of their data set, and it is, my organization cares a lot about my overall well-being, right? And it's a Likert scale. It's strongly agree all the way to strongly disagree. Guess what the highest year was? And I'll limit your guessing opportunities here. In the last 10 years, guess what year respondents had the greatest level of yes, they strongly agreed at the highest percentage. My organization cares a lot about my overall well-being. Guess what the highest in the last 10 years was?
During COVID
100% right.
was, yeah.
Absolutely right. Why? And this is a classic case of fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And the data is really telling in this. It says, or basically we can interpret from the data, when COVID hit at a rate of like 40 something percent, my memory escapes me, I think it's 43%, respondents said, yes, my organization cares a lot. They strongly agree that my organization cares a lot about my overall well-being. Guess what happened the year after?
We went down,
And the year after?
probably down a little more,
And the year after?
continues to plummet.
It's exactly right. So why did my organization only care about me when there's a pandemic going on? Well, I have my editorial or my commentary is because we had to. We had to keep the lights on. We had to keep the revenue coming in. We had to continue to serve customers or clients. Or so. I mean, I remember the role I was in. I was leading the world's largest mail order pharmacy, among other things. We filled 53 million prescriptions a year. In that role, I had about 14,000 employees, and we had employees walking out of the door with giant monitors. They took their desktops home because not everybody had a laptop, and we had no choice. And boy, did we bend over backwards to make that transition easy. We went out of our way to make sure it was as less abrasive or just not as obnoxious as it could have been, because we needed people to continue to work. So yeah, it sure did appear like we cared a whole heck of a lot about the overall well-being until we didn't. And when the lights were able to stay on and COVID was kind of getting further and further in the rearview mirror, that fool me twice, shame on me scenario starts to kick in. So, we expect loyalty from our teams. We expect loyalty from our employees. We want people to come to work and be excited to be part of something. Well, it's a two-way street, man. The organization and the leaders within each organization, they play a vital role in establishing that sense of belonging and establishing that mission, that common mission. We're a part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that is a real strong indicator that COVID did exactly the opposite of what you and I were hoping to see.
It's interesting. We're talking about culture today, and you and I have both spent many weeks, days, months on airplanes flying all over the place
Oh yeah.
outside of the U.S. So, how do you find the translation of the beginning with we
Yeah.
principles outside of the U.S.? Because culturally, people are different everywhere, but I think we're
Yeah.
still all human at the end of the day.
You just answered your own question, pal.
No, but
That's it. That's it. Look, the nature of, and I said, the nature of problems that leaders and organizations face today, and some could argue are wildly different than they were 10 years ago, maybe 50, whatever, even 2 years ago, essentially. You can argue that the problems are wildly different. I would argue the solutions are exactly the same. It's people. It's people. When you actually give a shit about those that you lead and care about their growth, their journey, their development, the role that they play. Like there's this expression, right? I just feel like I'm a cog in a machine, which I look at it very differently. A cog in a watch is incredibly important to the functioning of that watch. They play that cog plays a vital role in this watch functioning on time and being perfectly aligned with time. So if we stop treating people as if they're just a piece of something and actually treat them as if they're an integral part of that thing, the results will take care of themselves. The sense of belonging will happen, and we'll do it in a way that provides fulfillment, satisfaction, and a real life connection, not just a boss and a subordinate connection, which is, I know some of your audience might be just like, this guy is so rainbows and unicorns. But it's true. It's true. It is absolutely true. And I'm a product of that. I was a guy that led with an iron fist for a lot of years. And I was a guy that tried to intimidate. And yes, I delivered great results at a cost that I'm not proud of and at a level of fulfillment that I have only realized over the course of the last, say, 7 or 8 years.
We're doing a series, Kyle, on just social impact. And so just curious, it seems like a lot of the best brands have a ton of focus on really social responsibility. And I'm just curious in your work, if you found a correlation with those that have the highest regard for social responsibility, if that ticks and ties to what they're doing on the inside.
So I have gotten a question or questions similar to this, and my answer is not always received the way I intend it to be received. I look at it this way. If we have to have an initiative to be socially responsible or do the right thing for the environment or the right thing for our people, I look at it similar to like DEI initiatives. Like if we have to have an initiative, we got a bigger problem. We need to treat people in a way that doesn't require an initiative. So I know it's a cop-out answer, but it's an unpopular answer. Of course, I want to be associated and be a part of an organization that is on the right side of history for social issues, on the right side of history for diversity and equity and inclusion issues. We got to hire people and bring people on board that have consistent views on these things, these topics, with the same thread that we talked about a moment ago, and that is people, right? Caring about the people of the organization. So, yeah, it's not dissimilar to some prospects or clients that reach out to me. It's like, oh, we have a culture issue. We need this transformation. Come in and say a few words, check a box, move on. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. So I know it's not a popular answer and might rub some people the wrong way, but I think initiatives are just that. They're not lifestyles. They're not ways of life. They're not sustainable. So let's stop with the initiatives, but be more direct and overt on hiring people that can carry that water for us and be good humans and lead our teams in a way that we can all be proud of. We don't have to have an initiative to do so. Now, if you're an organization that's struggling, yeah, you probably have to be direct and maybe kick off an initiative. but it's not a one, it's a way of life.
What I've noticed is that from a social impact or community service perspective, the employees really get into it. So when you're running a call center in Cairo and there's some social issue that needs to be dealt with, homeless people, I don't know what it would be. The people that work within the and I'm talking from a contact center perspective now, they really like to get out into the community and to give back. So from that perspective, I think it's important. But that gets back to the we. That gets back to making people feel valuable, making them feel important, and recognizing contributions and allowing them to make contributions. From a corporate perspective, I just think companies, to your point, need to check a box. And whether it's the designations that they have to hire into, or whether it's the social programs that they participate in. I think a lot of times they're doing it to check a box and not really to make a difference.
Yeah, it's marketing.
You got to make
it's marketing, right?
I love the book, man. I will say I appreciate you.
You clearly read it.
I read the book. I appreciate you, Kyle, and I do use that term, by the way, all the time. It's very important because people need that sense of it's that recognition we talked about. I can't wait for the next book. Really, really appreciate having you here, and I think we'll do it again.
Well, that wraps up another episode of CX on Point. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you on the next one.